Welcome back. Losing is one thing, but losing by kicking 2 goals in 3 quarters as a top 2 side is another. And it probably had you severely questioning your life choices had you found yourself at Marvel Stadium on Friday night. Losing Harry McKay pre-game should have signalled a shift tactically, but instead, it was like Harry McKay had taken to the field. Because of this, the attacking side took a bizarre hit like nothing we've seen this season, and today I'm understanding why. Make sure to drop a like and subscribe to the show if you're new so you can remain tuned for the next iteration of Carlton analysis. And if you feel anything monetary is warranted, there is an option down below. Enjoy. So to keep it simple, Carlton's system doesn't exist without Harry McKay. Look no further than this staggering detail for targets inside 50. When has Carlton's forward 50 entry style, even their build-up game, ever been optimized for a Matt Owies? If it was, this would be far less lopsided. Evidently, Carlton found out the hard way what happens when you can't activate the emergency lever as a countermeasure for plan A not functioning. Of course, trying to play out the plan without one of your key pillars.
We know that to be the team we need to be, it takes a tribe.
This performance demonstrated exactly that in a game where it felt like Charlie or bust. A lack of expansiveness was clear. Disappointing against a side who struggles to defend ball movement from the back half. Down the line kicking was a feature, as Carlton got trapped in their back half. This, of course, off the back of a bloodbath occurring in centre field and around the ground, even despite Carlton getting first possession on occasion. The effectiveness of these first possessions were voided, as has been the trend for weeks. The Blues were upended, met with brutal and relentless tackling, as Port Adelaide's defensive metrics were through the roof, supported by Jordan Lewis's magnificent foreshadowing of the issue pre-game. And this set up disaster given Carlton scored nearly 3/4 of their first half points off the back of turnover. Not nearly as possible to apply when defensive numbers can't press up to clamp it in the forward half. With a down-the-line game style, Harry McKay is integral for structure. Curnow can play deep where he's a deadeye with Harry high up, or they can interchange that responsibility. Harry's tall, he can take contested grabs, and it helps us progress forward. It makes those down-the-line kicks a bit of an easier pill to swallow because at the very least, he'll hold defenders accountable. If he doesn't mark, that ball goes to ground, and it's a bit of a stronger guideline for smaller forwards and midfielders to station themselves either at this contest or the next. However, with Lewis Young as a replacement, the desired outcome was blurry and unclear, and De Koning also being ruled out exacerbated the issue. Carlton were small with these absences, and even smaller when you compare how tall Port's medium to smaller defenders were compared to our small forwards. Charlie Curnow saw most of Port Adelaide's resources made easier with numbers compressed on one side of the ground. Curnow played deeper and the ball didn't get to him. If Curnow won a free kick or marked it upfield, there's nothing ahead, sending Carlton back to square one, needing to kick long and play slower with options rushing back. With that, and without any evidence of Carlton being able to hit a gutsy short to mid pass, Carlton were one-dimensional, placed too much burden on Curnow, and got smacked for territory, most evidently in the second half. I reckon I could provide a boatload of examples, but I'll give you a few that just about covers everything. This is absolutely stuffed. I cannot understand how Adam Saad with the football goes on his non-dominant side to a part of the field with 13 matchups inside a 30 to 40 meter part of the field? I'd be interested to see how Port Adelaide would react if you swung Lewis Young to this side and moved Charlie Curnow to the other side. If they wanted to double team Charlie on an open side, then Carlton would have a spare in a more cluttered environment, which I'd say would favour the Blues to progress forward. Equally, if Saad wanted to go with Charlie in this case, he can activate this space with more time and space to bolt forward because he can't get tagged or bag extra attention doing the kick in. For a bloke who gained 25 meters in 3/4 as a running halfback, this was a magnificent opportunity. But what do I know? This is just a suggestion. In the end, Wiedering tries to go away from Curnow, but our personnel problem means the outcome falls flat. You've also got the problem of Lewis Young just not having a clue what he's doing, moving into Charlie's leading space and sucking a taller power defender to our extra man in Kennedy. The kick sits up and it's very much the same compared to our other down the line kicks, but look, this was a real issue with our forward 50 entries and the stronger synergy between Curnow and McKay not on show. This is where Port really lifted from a defensive perspective, not allowing the short kicks for an initial down the line play. Carlton switch, but retreat, and Port Adelaide, once the kick goes to Wiedering, there's no one challenging the inner spaces. The benefits to a switch dissipate. No one looks interested in taking responsibility to change the method. A down the line kick on one side becomes a down the line kick on the other side, and with how tightly Port Adelaide played man on man, Carlton don't have anywhere near a chance to dominate from here, with that first tackle really important to prevent Port Adelaide from committing extra players to try hold it in. Of course, if the Carlton players' arms jar free, then you have issues. But then of course, if it is a switch with less delay, it's counting on higher precision, and even still, the matchups are not favourable. Young's up at halfback as a ruck, Curnow's upfield down the line, so he'll roll over to be the final kick on a switch. Hollands does well with the body use, but the kick is awful. And I'd imagine the way Zerk Thatcher positioned himself on Kennedy has something to do with it. Kennedy's not leading, he wants it over the back, so that's going to have to go high and long, and Zerk Thatcher's got the height advantage. Swinging across the body can go wrong sometimes because you can lose shape and distort the kick, and nothing about this sequence helps that cause. Gov had a pretty good game, but I'm going to call this out because no one will. That's a kick in my eyes you absolutely need to hit. No one is offering anything remotely high percentage with the way the body language is right now. How and why are you ignoring a wide open pass you should be able to hit with your eyes closed? And he's open for decades. This should open the entire ground up and disperse the numbers a bit. A bit of freedom that a kick over here will not grant you. Well, it gave Kennedy a shot at goal, funnily enough, but you get me. Most times this equated to nothing. Now, you could make a case for McGovern making amends and simultaneously screwing us over again. What is going on here? The kick to Hollands could be triggered. Kennedy could be hit up if McGovern was feeling confident, but given he isn't feeling confident, by the time he actually kicks out, targets outside 50 are running back so they can restart their lead at the ball carrier. Gov ignores the shorter pass to Kennedy and the Waiters option. Well, that may provide much the same result as the other side with slow play. So we're back to square one. Aaliyah intercepts and then Port Adelaide cut it to 2, and that's a direct byproduct of the kick-in. And as I mentioned before, I reckon I've got about 10 to 15 more examples if you wanted or requested them. Now, the comment that some of you may be making is this: how does a team go from kicking 7 goals in one quarter to kicking 1 goal in the next half? If I'm completely blunt with you, this is from Port Adelaide's end primarily, and Carlton not adjusting, having seen Port Adelaide's improvement in 3 main areas: discipline, IQ, and defensive intensity, all tied together. If you notice, Carlton's back half approach was the exact same. Down the line kicking, switching, and clearance work felt as productive. Kick-ins had the same layout and structure. But in the second quarter, Port gave away free kicks in damaging areas to hand Carlton territory without any pressure on the ball carrier or give them shots at goal. And then Carlton's midfield made themselves most known in the second quarter with a few tackles around the ground and in the middle. But from a ball movement perspective out of the back half, nothing changed. Carlton's influx of goals saved face, given the clearance problem and back half problem still existed. The minute Port Adelaide's unnecessary lapses were eliminated, Carlton needed to acknowledge that they were going to get what they were given. That wasn't much, and change accordingly. As we've noted already, they didn't. Let's highlight a few select examples. Take this kick in, for example. Compare the options on this side of the ground to this side of the ground. Almost identical to what we saw for later on in the game. Nothing short on really no leading options, basically indicates Carlton were never entertaining that side of the ground. The only difference being, instead of this being a down the line kick, Carlton get a 50-meter penalty. Instead of kicking to a contest where the chances of winning aren't all that high, that's where Newman's going to end up on the back of the 50. Remove the ill discipline and I'm not all that sold, we get it inside forward 50, which was of course incredibly problematic in the second half. This was a symptom of what was to come. Centre bounce clearances for the Blues had the same look, where Carlton get the sweeper free, but Port Adelaide would have totally lived with Carlton only accessing the edge of the 50 on the flank with a high ball. With that positioning and Port Adelaide's defenders clearly possessing the physicality and height to outdo the Blues initially, it couldn't be any further to a goal-scoring opportunity from a Blues clearance. And well, the goal out of back 50 stoppage here is a complete smokescreen for the problem, which we saw later on. If Curnow played deeper, the option higher up isn't as favourable. The kick does bring Kennedy into the game, given Zerk Thatcher's height advantage practically gets eliminated here with the ground ball, but it still favours Zerk Thatcher. He gets to the ball first. Even the final kick, Carlton are so high up the ground that always as the final option can run at the ball carrier, but would need an extra kick to make up the distance. Maybe Curnow's that option with the extra meters he has on Aaliyah, but because he doesn't, and that's not easy to anticipate in the moment, we need to go more direct, and well, the kick is just not good enough. Not enough precision, it needs to be lower and flatter to clear Bergman and activate the space in behind. The matchup was problematic for this type of kick as we've seen, given it feeds into a higher, slower delivery. The only difference is that Bergman doesn't mark. Let's not get things twisted. Both kicks did not advantage. Situationally, with the matchups and structure, they were disadvantaged. As I've said though, Port practically had possession twice and squandered it. Dare I say it, if this happened in the second half, it's not going beyond halfway. Ollie Hollands was one of the easy scapegoats on the weekend, but this was one of the few occurrences Carlton went to the weaker side by choice, and the precision allows play to flow, and the man kicking out to relish the time and space. We talked about this a bit earlier with Adam Sard. Carlton by default have the extra man on this side, and it forces the power to play a bit more of an in-between game, freeing up options for the Blues. You're sort of seeing the issue though with Carlton needing to hit up smaller players as a counterpunch for the mismatch in height, because Carlton don't tend to hit a high percentage of these passes, but Ollie pioneering that run into the forward half allows a bit more of a pressing up, and Carlton's backline to shunt the Powers rebound forward. And from there, Carlton get a shot at goal off the back of a free kick and they complete the play. This was a diamond in the rough for kickouts, and you have Ollie Hollands to thank. That forward half football does not come into play without him doing what he did. And I just want to quickly highlight how important that territory was. We noticed in the second half, Port's pressure around stoppages meant Carlton couldn't get that backline player like a Newman sit behind the play and slingshot Carlton forward to keep it in their forward half. From a kick in when it was in the forward half, Carlton's men float behind the ball and then that spread could occur. So structurally, we're more sound. Much to the same effect as we saw in the previous example, anything errant by Port Adelaide affected by Fogarty's pressure could be met by the Blues in this situation as they press up. You'll notice how effective territory was for the Blues as the re-entry supplements a mismatch on Curnow and a shot at goal due to the free kick reaped by this mismatch. Overall, losing Harry McKay should have signalled a plan B, but it didn't. Carlton went with a down-the-line kicking game, and this was incredibly counterproductive to their chances of winning, given the circumstances as we've discussed today. If I sound too harsh, let's hear Vossi's words, which sum up my stance quite well.
It's not me putting that on them. It's just that that's the fact, and that's the story of the game, and so we have to accept the story for what it is, and we have to get better.
Was Carlton's down the line kicking playing percentages and the mids needed to lift? Did the personnel have that much of a bearing in the result of the game? Was the one-dimensional play simply not good enough? So much to unpack. Tell me what your stance is in the comments. Hope you enjoyed. We'll chat to you next week, but until then, stay safe, have a good one, and bye for now.